Hello everyone, welcome to a new episode of Albano Talks. Today we're here with Majd Kajan. How are you doing, Majd?
I'm alright. How about you?
Very good actually. So Majd is a friend of mine and he studies architecture here in Stockholm. How is it to study this kind of program?
I think it's very different from like everything that I was used to in school, like from kindergarten until 12th grade. Because coming into here, I mean, I was used to things like lots of reading and practicing exercises and like writing exams. And then you come in here and it's all about like just like crafts and like being more like artsy, and there isn't so much like reading books. We don't have any exams. There's a lot more like doing things with your hands and like just the creative process. And so I think it's like very interesting and different from that of like which I was used to before. And I mean, I like it, but it was difficult to get used to it at first.
Yeah, I can understand that. It's also very different. Like, I think it's the only kind of program in the whole campus that has its own building, right?
Yeah, we basically stay in our own ivory tower, and we're kind of academically isolated from the rest of campus. It's actually something that we've been like telling the school about, that we would prefer to have classes in other parts of campus and like just have more of an exchange with the rest of the students here. But we do have our own building, so mostly we stay here.
It's so curious because you get like into the campus, you have like everyone going to their own buildings, but the architecture building looks like the VIP one,
Yeah, because it is newly built, and we got this building after the old one across the street burnt down, and of course it had to stick out. But yeah, I mean, everyone gets a desk, and everyone gets a locker, and you need to be an architecture student to access the building. Well, we have access to all the other buildings on campus.
But it is also a very active program. Like, you have to come pretty often, and they kind of make you be in this sorts of community with your table. It seems like here, because you share tables with like many other students in your studio, right?
Yeah, I mean, we have these tables and we share like 6 people per table. And like, it does feel a lot more, I mean, when we studied Swedish together, that was more like many other programs here in this country where you just have a few classes a week and otherwise you study on your own. But here it feels more like high school, where you have a desk and you come and sit like every day from the morning to the evening. Most days, like, we're here sitting together.
Yeah, that's so true. I mean, in my program, I barely know some people that are in my program, and I barely even saw them.
No, here we really just like, I mean, it's even more than in high school, I would say, because I mean, in high school you have to sit and listen to a teacher, but here we just like mostly sit and like talk to each other and work on our own. But yeah, so it is like very active, like I said.
So you also need some sort of high grade to get inside this program, right?
I mean, yeah, most people who apply don't get in. It's not easy. I didn't get in with my high school grades. I had to do the university exam. But then also a third of the students get accepted through another like exam, which is specifically for this program. Where like you get an assignment that's like in architecture, some sort of like design assignment, and you have to do it. But I did the like högskola program, and yeah.
So, because I was thinking that I did IB. That's why it was sort of a mess to get inside here. Right?
Yeah, I mean, the conversion rate between IB grades and the Swedish system isn't the best, and I also was missing some subjects because we only study 6 subjects in the IB system, including Swedish, which the Swedish that I studied in the IB didn't qualify me for university studies. So I did have to do a bunch of other stuff.
So it happens in exactly the same to my sister, which she was also in the last episode of the podcast of Albano Talks. And basically that, yeah, she did IB, but the conversion is not good at all. And also apparently that year, it was sort of tougher, or it seemed like they had put like higher requirements in the exams. So I don't know, not everyone got their expected grades at the end.
Yeah, I don't know about that, but I do remember that like the pass rate or the fail rate for my class was like 25%, I think. I think it was even more like the average, like abroad and like globally. So many people don't even pass.
That's crazy.
Yeah.
The IB, wow. But going back to architecture, you have this, what sort of aptitudes would you need to be able to succeed or to hold on to this program, at least hold on?
I mean, it is all about the creative process, and you have to like have the desire and the drive to like create. And like most of us have like creative backgrounds, and like many people do things with like art and music. Many of us have studied these. I mean, I had art as a subject in the IB. Many of us play instruments, for example, or were involved in theater. I was as well. So I would say that, like, first and foremost, like a love for the creative process and like an innate desire to want to create. Because like that's your assignment as an architect. But then also like you have to be willing to work hard and to put in the time and to just like, it takes a lot. Many people are here over the weekends, or they're working like from home over the weekends, over breaks. It's not like, you really have to be active. This isn't something you can just like do in the background. Sometimes I hear about people that study like 2 programs at the same time. Wow. I don't know how they do that, but I think we could do that.
You know something, the other day when I was in my micro class, I was speaking about like, yes, I know a lot of people that is studying architecture, and they're in Stockholm University, at least in my class. They had this perception of architecture of like, oh, well, that's so easy. You just have to do like some drawings. It's like the kids program, like for giving some sort of example, you know, like they undervalue it so much. I guess because they already know how it is, actually.
Yeah, I mean, that could be because, especially at our program here at KTH, we don't like study a lot of technical, like physics and math courses, and we don't have any exams in them. But I would say the creative process, like, I mean, it's not easy. I mean, I guess if you want, you could do the bare minimum, but the people who are here aren't really here to do the bare minimum, because, I mean, it's not worth it. If you're in it for the money, there's better things to study.
Yeah, that's true. Also, the teachers, I guess that they put you quite a big pressure, right?
I mean, yeah, no, but they do, and that's the thing. Like, you know, maybe you draw something, but then like when you show up to a presentation and show it to the teachers, and you get roasted. So I wouldn't say it's easy.
Yeah, no, I don't think so either. Actually, just to like realize is at the beginning is to see the kind of grade that you need to that you need or require to get inside the program. But it is a tough program, and you already been 3 years in it.
Yeah, now is the third year.
Third year. Any idea of, because you also have to do some sort of, I mean, when you're finishing your bachelor's, you kind of have to do what we call like a candidatic exam, which is like, for me, it's a bachelor's thesis. But what is it for you? Like a bachelor's project?
Exactly. I think that's what we have, and it's next term, and it's like going to be 50% of our studies. And it's all related to the project that we're currently working with in Nynäshamn in the south of Stockholm. So yeah, we have like a bachelor's project. but I haven't read the course like description. But I mean, I've heard that's gonna be also a lot of work, and we only start in February, so it's not that much time either.
Yeah, I get it. So, but yes, and what would you say, for example, for those people that would want to take this sort of program and to do architecture? And if you wanted to give them like the best view of what do you do in architecture, like you do modeling, you use AutoCAD for doing drawings, you also have to draw by hand. Is that like all the things, or do you also photography?
So I mean, we create space. It can be, and then we have to show it through like different tools, and it could be anything from like a map to a model, a physical model, a 3D model. It could be like sketches by hand. They could be like perspectives, or they could be sketches on a computer. And then you have obviously like more like blueprints, like plans and sections, and then even like it's like so we it's always about like creating and trying to explain, like you create this 3D space in your head, and then you have to like explain to somebody else, and you have to show it somehow with more than just words, with like something physical.
And that's how I assume that's why these blueprints are made. So in a way you can show the concept of or the way that you see this construction for example, the construction company, right?
Yeah, exactly. I mean, either it could be the sorts of drawings that are there for clients and for people, like third parties, the people who are going to be living in the place, or it could be for more like technical drawings, and these are for the constructors. We like so far haven't done like, we've done like some level of like technical drawing, but mostly not so much. I would say like the stuff we do for our presentation seems more like how you would present to a client, rather than the drawings that you would send to the constructor who's supposed to like build it.
That's interesting, because I remember I did it was part of my high school program, technical drawing, and we did have to do all these sort of things like the sections and all that, which you kind of had to do too, right? You also do sections.
Yeah. So we do sections, and you could use AutoCAD. We also have Rhino, which like this week I've been trying to work on a section with Rhino. I mean, last year I did a lot more like by hand, but it can be difficult. But it's like the whole time you're developing this ability to visualize in your head 3D space, so that you can like actually represent it on paper, and then you have to get good at showing it in a way that other people can understand, and not just you or other architects.
I have never used Rhino. I did use AutoCAD, but it was kind of simple exercises with AutoCAD.
Yeah.
What would you say is the difference? I don't really know.
I mean, I am not that experienced with Rhino, but it seems like they have the same commands, and it's mostly that AutoCAD is 2D and Rhino is the same thing but 3D.
They say that it's tougher, Rhino.
Yeah, it definitely seems more complicated. And we got some like weird assignments from our school, at least last year, for the Rhino that didn't necessarily help to understand how things were. Just like we had to create these like abstract shapes, and I felt it was, or not just me, many people have complained about it and said that it was not very pedagogical for like being the first ever thing you do in the program.
Doing that in a computer program, you have to do it on a computer program. That sounds terrible. Now I remember when you had to do similar things, but with models made out of how do you call this in English?
Plaster.
Plaster, exactly. And it was already kind of crazy to think, how would you modulate something that is an abstract concept, for example?
Yeah, there's a lot of conceptual stuff and buzzwords and abstract thought here. Sometimes it can feel like it's meaningless, but I mean, also you have to learn how to. It is like, I mean, it's all about like concepts and having like being able to think as well on an abstract level. But I mean, I would say personally that sometimes it can seem a bit ridiculous. I know, like in my studio when we started, and our first assignment was to create some abstract models, and they were supposed to like not represent anything, but also like exist as some sort of physical object, and by necessity, at least I would say like they do represent something. And some people just quit when they saw that assignment. It can be hard to take seriously, but I mean, I can't say that I didn't learn from those assignments. I don't know if it's the best way, however, to go about these kinds of things, but like afterwards we started doing more like buildings and architectural like assignments as opposed to that, which was a lot more like abstract and like more like artsy.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, what would you say, for example, that is your favorite, I wouldn't say type of architecture, but like, you know what I mean, modernist, who's modernist?
Style.
Yeah, styles, exactly.
Well, yeah, I don't know, it's hard to pick just one, but it's definitely not postmodernism or anything like that. I really like national romanticism, which is a style that this campus is built in.
Mm.
And I like as well, like Romanesque architecture. So that's like early medieval churches after like a classical period, Byzantine architecture as well. And like we have like that in Syria, for example, like the churches, and then afterwards like the Ottoman mosques, which are based on these Byzantine churches, or like, and the cascading domes like that. I think that looks nice. Also like just in general, the sort of like vernacular architecture in specifically like Mediterranean countries, like the pale like sort of sandy limestone and the roof tiles, the orange roof tiles. Like I would say like vernacular Levantine, which is like the architecture in the Levantine region, like Syria, Palestine, in the Eastern Mediterranean, and Lebanon and Jordan. And that's just biased because I'm from there, but I really like it. But just in general, actually, like vernacular architecture is really nice because like the human scale of it, and just like the traditions that have like been passed on from like the past, and also just how it's very unique. Like every country and every region, even every city, has its own like little differences compared to, for example, classicism, which there's a lot of variety across countries, but it's also a lot more maybe uniform. But I do really like as well classical architecture. So I can't say I have like a single favorite style. It really depends on the program of the building, like the functions it's going to have. And definitely like, I would say place is like one of the most important things, and that has to determine as well the expression of any building. So for example, like this campus here, it's the style it's built in, it fits very well. I mean, it's national romantic, and it's like, it's an important campus here in Stockholm, and it just feels right. It feels like sort of like grand, and this is like a public institution, and this is like a place for knowledge and education. This is somewhere where people are supposed to like come and congregate. And but maybe the like different styles of architecture work better for different uses or different areas. I wouldn't necessarily want to see like such a brick building. I mean, or at least I wouldn't expect to see it like in a Mediterranean country.
Yeah, definitely.
Where it's much more common in like Northern Europe. Because it also has to do like this comes into sustainability and like building with local materials. And that's what was available at the time here, the brick.
And also that it's somehow connected to the culture of the place, and maybe the architecture represents the culture of the country.
Yeah, exactly. I mean, I see red bricks and I think of Sweden.
Mm.
Or like, I see like pale white or sort of beige stone, and you think of like any Mediterranean country, whereas like grayish sort of silver, like more like a silver tone, that's got a more northern, more like, if I saw such a castle, I would be like, is it in England, for example? But definitely, I mean, here in Sweden, if we talk about vernacular architecture, there's a lot of wooden architecture, and that's like a very strong tradition. And nowadays, people have started even designing like in cities, larger buildings, like apartment buildings and even towers with wood that haven't, I mean, these things haven't been built for a while because like they all got like burnt down in fires, and then it was made illegal and you had to build that stone. So yeah, it's interesting to see like the connection between this place and the materials.
Mm. The thing that you mentioned with the using the wood as a material for building decently high buildings, we can't do the, it's like, I don't think it's physically impossible to make skyscrapers with wood, but maybe like 10 stories tall or a bit less made of wood. It was like a concept that wanted to be used, but it never proved that it was better than not granite, but you know which material I mean, the concrete, exactly. But at the same time, concrete, it's let's say, is like less sustainable in the ways of that it can contaminate more when producing the concrete, right?
Yeah, I mean, the thing about the concrete is it's also the modern way that we use it. I mean, concrete on its own can last a really long time, like the Pantheon in Rome. The dome is made of concrete and it's been around like forever. But like in a modern building, the concrete has, I don't know, like if it's steel, like it has steel beams or steel, like, and there's other stuff in it as well. And it's like the concrete and the steel together. And that causes the concrete eventually to start to fall apart.
Mm.
Well, like I don't know that much about it. And I would say that goes back to how we don't learn so much about stuff like this here.
Yeah, maybe that's for the people that study more physics stuff or like civil engineers. Or...
But I mean, there are like, I mean, I've read about companies that are trying to make concrete that, like emits a lot less CO2. So that can also be a solution for the future. Because I don't think like, I mean, wood is, I think it's best to also have a variety of choices. And it's great like to build more wooden structures, but I don't think we're going to stop using concrete.
Yeah, I agree. What about the kind of lie of making a building with like a wooden facade so that it looks more sustainable, but in the inside it might be like sustained by concrete?
Yeah, I mean, this building is concrete. We're sitting in right now, and the outside is covered in like a metal metal plates, and the inside, many of the walls are covered in wood.
In wood, yeah. But when you walk around, you see a lot of wood everywhere, and it sort of gives you, I think, it gives you the perception of being more warm.
Definitely. And I mean, I wouldn't say it's like fake to cover a material in something else, because it's always been done. I mean, most of the buildings in Stockholm that are older were built like using bricks, and then the bricks are covered in plaster, and sometimes the plaster is like formed in a way that it looks like stones, and this has been done since like Roman times. And wood definitely, for example, like it's important as well, like to take into account how people feel inside of a building. I mean, we've studied, or like we've spoken about a study at in my studio, in my class, about how there was this hospital and they had these two wards, and one of them was more like plain and sort of like modern, and the other one was covered like with wood. And they would notice the one that was wooden, or like had wooden interiors, the people who went there to recover, the patients, they would recover like more quickly because they just like felt better. So the human aspect is important, and we've always been like using different materials for the different layers of a building. Like in Roman times, the Romans like picked up classical architecture from the Greeks, but they didn't use the same sort of like construction methods. because like in Greece you had like the columns, and then on top of them like it was like this, and like you had columns like supporting the stones, and it was like lateral. And then you notice the Roman architecture, there's a lot of like valves, arches.
Yeah.
And that's because a lot of stuff was actually built with like Roman bricks, and it was just like treated with like the building is like built in bricks, and then the facade is like in marble and covered in like all this classical architecture from Greece and the marble, but the construction itself is in brick. So we've always been like doing this.
Yeah, very interesting. So it's something that it's a characteristic that happens all over time, right?
Yeah.
Very, very interesting, actually. You've probably previously mentioned that you have a background from the Eastern Mediterranean part of Europe, right? Or not Europe, but like Eastern Mediterranean, let's say. So tell us a little bit about your background. Where did you live on your days?
Well, I mean, I'm from Syria, but my parents moved from Aleppo to Saudi Arabia before I was born. So I was born and I grew up for the first 15 years of my life in Saudi Arabia, in the capital, Riyadh. But I got to visit Syria every summer up until 2011. And I don't remember much because we were like young enough that my friends didn't take us like sightseeing. Mostly we'd go to visit family. Plus I was young, so I don't have much memories. But I do remember some things, like the castle in Aleppo, which is like one of the largest in the world.
Haven't heard that.
And like some like the alleys and the old city. And just like, it was one thing like that got me interested in architecture, the whole way that like the origin of the whole story of like how I actually got into this was noticing the contrast between where we lived in Riyadh, which is a very like modern city that's like 50 years old or maybe a bit older, and then like Aleppo, which is thousands of years old, and just the architecture and urban planning in Riyadh, which is very like American, car dependent, a grid system, not much focus on the pedestrian, and Aleppo, which is very old, and the buildings are like in stone, many of them, and just like the roof tiles and the greenery and all the alleyways, and it's a more like walkable city. It's a more like the parks. It's just I would say like a more human way of like designing the city, and this is like the direction that all cities nowadays are like trying to move towards everywhere, which is like to take less focus, to put less focus on the car and more focus on like everything else, and to build like to consider the human scale and the human aspect to everything that we design. And so yeah, I mean, like growing up in Riyadh, it was a bit weird how it's a city and it's a large city, but it doesn't feel like the same urban experience that you might expect from many other cities in the world, because I lived in an apartment complex, and then I went to like this private school, and I was just driven with this bus from the private school sends the apartment complex, and I don't experience the city. I'm like here in Stockholm, or in Aleppo, or Paris, or Tokyo, or many other cities, or New York. Riyadh is, from what I've heard, probably more like Houston in the US, where you get in a car and you go places. But it's like your experience of the city is driving through the city. And then you're in places indoors, which I don't think is as nice.
Yeah, because that's the thing. It's so hot that you can barely be outside.
I mean, yeah, the thing with the weather in like Riyadh is because it's inland, it's not humid. But most of the cities in the Gulf region are on the coast, and the humidity makes it a lot worse. In the summer, like throughout the day, definitely it's really warm, and people try not to be like outside, especially not in direct sunlight.
How many degrees do you think in summer?
Like it could be up to like 40 something degrees at the warmest, at the peak of the day. But you could always sit in the shade, or like if you're swimming, then it could be really nice, because then like the water is cool and you go out of the water and you dry up. And that's like at the peak of the day. If it's cloudy, it's going to be lower. Like once like the sun starts setting, in the evening, it'll be a lot nicer because, I mean, because it's a desert, there's nothing to keep the heat in. So just like it gets hot in the day, it can also get really cold in the night because there isn't as much cloud cover to keep the heat in, and or like as much like biomass.
That's such a desert characteristic that night it's super cold.
So it gets cold. And then in the winter, like the weather would be like a lot more mild and nice, and it would rain a lot even sometimes. So it would even like kind of flood. But that was more or less our system's fault. But yeah, I mean, like it's like maybe people have this idea that, oh, you know, I would just drop dead if I were there. But I mean, people are living there, and it's like, I wouldn't say it's any more extreme than Sweden. It's just in the opposite direction. Like there you can enjoy being outside in the winter, and here you can enjoy being outside in the summer. And in both cases, they're like a short season, and most of the year has like weather that's not very ideal compared to other places with like a more temperate climate.
Well, as you mentioned before, I think you mentioned at least that everything is so massive in Saudi, or you have like such huge buildings. What do you think of this kind of projects? Like the line, for example, that it supposedly, or they're trying to sell it for investors, for it to be a whole city where everything is like 5 minutes away from you, and kind of a weird concept that everything is on a line.
Yeah, I mean, it really feels more like some sort of marketing scheme or just a way to get attention. I mean, we make fun of it a lot here in school, but there's really no logic to it. You could build the line as a square instead and just have many smaller squares and have a grid of a normal metro system in a city. Like, there's no reason that should be one line in the middle of nowhere. You could just like instead give an existing city a metro line, which they already are doing. Like in Riyadh, for example, I think when I was living there, they were like still constructing like 6 metro lines simultaneously. But like that won't give you headlines around the world in the same way that doing something gimmicky like that will. But I feel like it might end up being a cool ruin that people get to visit in the future. I don't know. I don't think like that sort of architecture and urban planning is really something that is focusing on the quality of life for the people living there, or on like creating something that's sustainable and using the Earth's resources wisely. It's just mostly about getting attention.
I don't even think that it's like a tourist friendly in a way, because if you compare it, for example, with I think it was Dubai that had this project of have you ever seen this? It looks like islands that look like palm tree. So
the palm tree.
But it's like very touristic, and that attracts like a lot of tourism. I wonder how the line would do the same thing when its purpose really is for people to fit in the less space possible, and to have like a very, and to have like an easy life, or at least that's what they say, like in terms of utility.
Yeah, and like as far as tourism is concerned, I can imagine some people going because it would be like cool to see it, like out of curiosity. But I don't know if it could ever be compared to like Dubai. It's like, I don't really think it could become, or I just don't see what would be so unique about it. Besides the fact that it's a line, it's kind of like, okay, that's cool. What do I do now?
I agree, yeah.
I mean, I don't know. Who knows like how it's going to turn out. I wish that they would have just given more of their existing cities metro systems instead of building something new in the middle of nowhere. When in reality, like, we need to be cutting down emissions globally and focusing on like just using less resources, using like cars less often.
I don't think that's the objective.
No. And I don't know, but like I would imagine that it would be better to use the funds that you have to like create a sustainable future. And I just don't know if the line's that sustainable future. And if it's a good investment for the future. But then again, if it gets them a lot of global attention, maybe it will be. Maybe it'll be that, like, some crazy tourist hotspot.
Yeah. I heard some time ago, I don't know if they're still doing this sort of investment, but I heard that in Saudi and Dubai and other countries in the region that were like countries from the OPEC, which is like the sort of like a oligopolium or cartel that controls all the oil in the Middle East, that they were thinking of making huge investments in green energy.
Yeah.
To like have in order to not depend on oil. And the same with tourism, they don't want to depend on much on oil, but it's like invest more so that people come to the country as tourists. I don't know if they're continuing doing that in terms of green emissions, in sustainable energy. That's what I heard some time ago.
Yeah, I mean, I would imagine they have great opportunities for like solar energy, for example.
And they have the money for it.
There's just a lot of empty land that you could like do stuff in without having to worry that you don't have to like cut down a forest if you want to like have a huge field of solar panels or like windmills or whatever. So I don't know, but like that region of the world, like as the climate gets warmer, it's going to be one of the worst affected, especially like the coastal areas in the Gulf. And so I would be more worried about that and like trying to do something about that so that you wouldn't have to abandon these places once the temperatures start to become like 60 degrees Celsius or something, if it ever gets there, as opposed to like, especially with the humidity, it can get to the point where like it's simply like lethal to be outdoors for more than a few hours. People will drop dead unless they have an AC. And of course,
in the lungs,
yeah, like
humidity.
And using the AC itself is just like causing more CO2 emissions, which is causing the warmer weather. So, yeah.
I assume that these are like the most, like the richest countries from this region of the world. In terms of architecture, what would you say that is the difference between Saudi, Qatar, Dubai?
Honestly, I don't know that. It's hard to say. I mean,
Qatar is a small.
Yeah, the thing is, like, it's all very similar, at least the modern stuff. I don't actually have like the best knowledge of the traditional stuff, like the old stuff. And that's because like I grew up in Riyadh, which I don't know like if there are old neighborhoods, but like I never got to see them. But everything I saw was new. And so it all feels very modern. I would say that like outside of Saudi, the other Gulf countries do feel like they are more luxurious and like, for example, in Riyadh, there weren't that many skyscrapers when I was younger, because I heard from my parents that there was a law that they wanted to like fill out the city, so there was a height limit. So there were a lot of like low buildings, like 2 or 3, 4 stories. And then they started building skyscrapers. But it definitely doesn't feel like it had the same skyline of like Dubai or Doha, for example, where it feels like there's a lot more skyscrapers. And like in Riyadh, I think the skyscrapers are mostly offices. And in Dubai, for example, my uncle lives there and he just had an apartment in a skyscraper. And like I also grew up in the same region, but to me that was something new because I didn't know anyone living in a skyscraper in Riyadh. So there are these differences, but there's a lot of modern stuff. The exception in like the Gulf region or the peninsula would be Oman. From like everything I've seen online, it seems like they have definitely taken care to like keep their vernacular architecture. From the cities of like the photos I've seen of their cities, there's just a lot of like low buildings that are like whitewashed and just like traditional vernacular architecture and not as many skyscrapers. And I think it looks really nice. It looks very touristy. It seems like a hidden gem that people don't talk about. But they're just like, I think they're also just as rich, but they just don't spend it on that kind of stuff. But from what I've read it's still like car dependent, but at least the buildings look nicer. Yemen as well, they're not so rich and they have a lot of like vernacular architecture. All these like houses, they are kind of like, they look like cookie they look like the houses you build out of cookies. They're like sort of like beige or brown, and then they have like they're like lined with like white, maybe plaster.
Yeah, I've seen that.
So like for like that's as far as like the Gulf is concerned. But that's the thing, like many of the cities there are like very recent and modern, unlike the cities in like the north of the Middle East, which are ancient.
Very interesting. Well, we're running out of time. It was amazing. I must say it was super interesting. I wish that we could hear more about it. But how about in next episode? Maybe
Yeah, I would love that.
you could come again. And I find it very interesting when you speak about the Middle East and how different in terms of architecture and so is to what we have here in Sweden, for example. Well, let's we're gonna have to wrap it up. And thank you very much, Mash, for coming here.
Thank you.
It was a pleasure to have you here. And for you, the viewers, will see you in the next episode of Albano Talks. Thank you very, very much, and goodbye. Have a nice day.